Okay, so picking up right where we left off, the next frame that I want to draw will be roughly halfway in between. I'm doing it on frame 8, so there's a little more room before than after. I've got 7 frames before and 6 frames after. That's kind of where I want to be. And the reason is that I'm thinking that because the ball is going to start up here and fall to the ground, that it's going to accelerate like all things do under the force of gravity. And so when I'm halfway through the animation, I'm not going to be anywhere close to halfway down to the bottom, right? The obvious thing to do would be to sort of like draw my circle here, right? Because you're halfway through the number of frames, and halfway means halfway. So there we go, we're halfway. Well, but it's not, because it's like not really how things really move. They're going to accelerate. So I really want to be about, maybe about a quarter of the way down. So if I think of my center as being here and here, I want it to be roughly here. Okay. So let me try to sort of approximate that. And I'm still going to keep my ball pretty round because it hasn't started really falling very much. That'll do. Now, that's a tiny bit big, but I'm not going to worry about fixing that until I know for sure that I need to. We'll see how that goes. Okay. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And with the same sort of split here. So I'm going to reduce my in skin, so I'm only seeing the 2 relevant keyframes that I want to think about here. Oh, and actually, I need to do a little bit more, because when it hits the ground, it's going to flatten out and then bounce up again. So I can't just go with this frame. I have to actually add the next frame to have the ball squash at the bottom, right? Because the ball is going to squash to bounce. So here we go. I'm not gonna really heavily change that. Well, that looks a little too big. Let me do that again. And a little awkward. Okay, that'll work. So now the ball is going to bounce, and then it's going to come back up again. So now I want to go halfway in between these 2. And so if I count 6 frames on that side and 6 frames on the other side, or actually now I'm going to have 5 frames on one side and 6 frames on the other side. And I'm going to put that extra behind me instead of in front of me. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, but I'm going to go more to the top again, because the ball is going to move fast coming off the bottom, and it's going to slow down as it gets to the top. So roughly in the same general area that I had the last one, but of course I'm going to end a little bit lower, so the whole thing will probably be a tiny bit lower. I'm just going to draw that. Okay. And now I can do the same thing. Let's take a look at that real quick. Okay, it's starting to kind of look like something's moving, but not that much. Let me go and add another one in, and then we'll get it even closer. So we really are halfway in between these 2. But again, because things are accelerating going down, I'm not really gonna be halfway in between. I'm gonna be more toward the beginning. So let me just go halfway in between there, approximately, keeping it centered and kind of in the same place. Now I'm going to use the keyboard to advance the keyframes with my comma and period button. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And again, I'm going to favor the end because I know more motion is happening at the end. And I'm going to move this so that I don't have to have that confusing image. I'm going in between these two frames only. And I'm going to do it just about halfway in between, maybe a tiny bit more to the top than that. So boom, 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 about here. And I'm going to start to kind of let it kind of get out of whack just a hair. Okay. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to do it on the other way, coming back. And again, favoring the end there and getting rid of the onion skin for the frame I'm not thinking about here. And I'm thinking that I'm gonna, when this bounces, it's gonna stretch out again. But I don't want to do that yet. I just want to get a circle halfway in between, and of course a little bit more because it's bouncing up, ignoring the fact that I have this extra frame. So I'm just in the middle there and a little more towards the top, so that'll be good. So it's going to be roughly somewhere around in here, okay? And now I'm going to do the same thing at the end. And this is going to be really easy because it's sort of halfway between here and here, and then maybe halfway between there. So let's do this. Oops, that didn't work. Let me do that again. Okay, and what we're going to see now is we're actually starting to kind of look like a ball that's bouncing when we preview it. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to save, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill these in. I'm going to compress that video for you guys, and I'll talk to you when I'm done. Okay. Okay, so now I've filled in all these drawings, at least to start with, and previewing it, I can see that it is starting to look fairly decent. And I'm not seeing a lot of obvious problems, although there is one spot right towards the end as it's bouncing up that it seems like it kind of moves too much. And I can double check this by simply expanding my onion skin more so I can see where there might be just a little too much motion. So right here, in fact, can you see how I sort of have like the same amount of distance here and then not very much below that? That shouldn't be like that. So what I can do is I can move this up a bit more, and then I can go to the next frame, or sorry, the previous frame, and hit Control A. And then I can move this one up some more and go back a frame and do the same thing again. Go back a frame and kind of do the same thing again. And basically your process on this should really be just looking at it as carefully as you can and adjusting the position of the ball each time to make sure that it's moving in a natural way. Animation is really every bit as much about looking at what you've done as it is about drawing it. Because whatever we draw, we can redraw, right? But the important thing is, what does it look like? What does it look like to the viewer? Because that's what we're concerned about. We're concerned about the experience of the viewer. Let's take another look. That is looking much better. So now let me go back and use my fill tool, and it will default to the same color that I'm using, so that's handy. And I'm gonna just go back to frame 1, and I'm gonna turn off the onion skin so I don't have to look at that right now. And I'm just gonna go through and fill them all in. And now let's save it and preview it. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. Now I can see there's a couple spots where the brush stroke is more noticeable, and I can easily go back and fix that. And of course, there's nothing to stop you from doing this with your mouse. Like, the mouse isn't as good as a stylus, but it'll work well enough at this level. It's not going to be a real complete circle, of course. I mean, it's not going to be a perfect circle the same way using the circle tool will, but you know what? I hope you're noticing by now that really it can be quite lively with a more natural looking kind of a shape. It doesn't have to be, perfect, and having it be sort of the imperfections. When they're noticeable, you kind of want to get rid of them, but when they're sort of more subtle, it actually lends a bit of life to your animation, which is really cool and can really sort of help a lot, I think. So that's pretty much, I'd say this is just about good enough, really. Let's take another look at it again. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now I can embellish this if I wanted to with a shadow, with highlights, coloration on the ball to make the ball seem more three-dimensional. But of course, that'd be a lot of work to go in and do that. But it's not hard to do. You're welcome to do that if you find yourself feeling like this isn't challenging and you can easily get all these to look just right and bounce just right. But I warn you, it's maybe a little bit more complicated than it looks. There is your bouncing ball. Now, I told you that I would turn this into a symbol, so let me do that. I'm just going to take all of the artwork here, both layers. I'm going to shift select both layers, right click, cut layers, and now it's defaulting to layer 1 again. I'm going to insert a new symbol. I'm going to call this dribble. You can call yours whatever you want. And then I'm going to paste those layers on the timeline of the symbol. And now that's odd. It looks like, actually, let me hit Control Z, and I'm going to, I'm just going to paste the layers. That's fine. That's fine. So a lot of times when I make symbols, I like to have them centered on or close to this cross here, which is sort of a target to let you control your symbol when it's on the stage, but it doesn't matter. Now I have all that artwork there in Dribble. Go back to scene 1. And if I look in my library, you can see that I have Dribble there. So, one really cool thing about symbols now is if I put this symbol on the stage, it looks like it's just like a circle, but it's actually the whole thing. And if I make my animation any amount of length of time that I want and preview it, you'll see that the ball will just kind of sit there and bounce the whole time, as long as I want it to, more or less. So that's how we're going to use this symbol, combine it with the other animation that we're going to do. Not only can I have this symbol here, but I can also pull down another copy and another and another. I can have as many as I want, which is pretty awesome. And there's a lot of different ways you can use this, but for today, that's not what I'm interested in. I've got this one done. So let me hit Control Z to get rid of all that and move on to the next animation, which I'll cover in the next video.